Stage Right, I believe that's Stage Right. Yeah. Is none other than my once a week work spouse, Bad Mike.
Hello. You
With
see,
his
I'm
Texas.
growing a beard. Growing a beard,
Oh,
so I'm looking scruffy. Usually Eric's scruffy, but to this week in next
oh
week
yeah,
it's gonna
I well, I had to
be
descruffify
scruffy.
because we had Alice on. I had to show respect.
I know. Well, yeah. One of our favorite people in the world, Alice Peng, is our guest tonight. So we're trying to. I would have looked nice for you, Alice, but I just got through with a 2 day 15-hour car ride, and I did 7 hours today, and I'm just beat. And I unpacked
And a
and I
food
unloaded
tour.
all our stuff for Frog God, and I got to say hi to everybody. I saw Skeeter and Levi and the Frog God people and Bill and a bunch. I just saw a bunch of people and said hi to everybody, and then I got to do a broadcast. See, I'm very dedicated because I said I got to do a broadcast. Oh look, it fell down. So that was a wonderful show.
On cue, everybody. Pretty much on cue.
Rach, by the way, is
So-
just off screen. So
Hi,
Rach
Rachel.
is it's kind of part of the show tonight. But so anyway, yeah. So I'm a game hole, and I'm going to hopefully have today everything went perfect. I got my badge, I got my room, everything was worked out fine. I'm in the Clarion, and I'm not begrudging my room because it's good to just get a room. But man, the Clarion, it's the one thing you can always be sure of. I've stayed at the Clarion every year I've been here for the last, 10 years or so. The one thing you can always be sure of is they have done absolutely no interior decorating since the last time. It's So anyway, but you know what? It's a good solid hotel room. There's a microwave. There's a fridge. You can see the room's pretty big. I mean, look, it's not a tiny room. There's a bathroom over there. It's got a closet, so it's got a little bathroom nook. So it's not tiny. It's fine. It's fun. So I'm excited about seeing everybody. Tomorrow's the first day. We're going to work the booth, and I'm excited about this. This is I've been working. I've done a lot of conventions this year. We did ReaperCon, and I did long Texas Game Expo. Of course, did North Texas. So I'm all excited about seeing everybody. A bunch of people here I haven't seen in a while. Tom Tullis is here. I haven't seen him in years.
oh damn.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. I'm glad to there, and I'm all excited that Alice is on the show tonight because we love to have Alice on. We would have her on every week if we could. I mean, she's very highly in demand. We can't always get her all the time, but she's very intelligent, and what we're going to be talking about tonight is something that it turns out she's somewhat of a specialist in, and she has.
I'm not going to call myself a specialist.
Okay, listen.
I have 300 hours in it, but
whoa, 300 hours is
You've been communicating with me for the past few months.
Not a specialist now.
She's been sending me things, and I'm blowing me away. Every time she sends me an image, I'm absolutely blown away. And I said, so you're going to be perfect to have on the show. We talk about AI art because this is something that's a potential huge game changer in the industry, and we need somebody who knows more than Eric and I do about it because we don't.
I know absolutely not.
Very little. But before we get to Alice, I want to talk to Eric about something that happened this week, and this was one of our favorite human beings got called to court today, and I was breathlessly waiting for some information, but Eric has been just cruel and just kept it to himself because he wanted to surprise me.
I have no information to give.
No, he said he would tell you some stuff after we were off air.
Oh, come on, man. Okay. So we can't tell it on air, but there was some things that happened today that probably didn't go very good for Mr. Lanasa because the reason he's called to court is because he's been violating everything there is to violate. And so there's a good chance the judge did a slap down today. So all right, so we can't talk about that. Dang it! But I'm interested because I always like to hear when a guy gets kicked in the nuts. A guy like Lanas gets kicked.
I would assume the next day or so there should be a summary on was it Packer, the federal site. We can So it'll start coming out. Packer, Pacer. Pacer, Packer, whatever. Dude, I say magazine. I say Zion. People say zine. Listen, it's tomato, potato,
It's
potato.
It's
It's not like you're speaking
Magazine.
Chinese where pronunciation actually matters, you know?
Yeah, well,
it's not magazine, it's magazine, so Eric's wrong.
Yeah, whatever.
He's right. He's right.
I'm a New Yorker.
Well, that's not an excuse for everything.
Pacer. All right, Pacer. Okay, thank you, Pacer.
All right, Eric's New Yorker. That's an excuse for everything. Hello, Ty. Hello. Golly, look, we've already got a bunch of Ty's already here monopolizing the chat here. Bob, Gunn. So hello to everybody here. So let me I'm going to start off a little bit, and then Eric can start off, and then we can just hand it over to Alice here. So a few weeks ago, Eric and I, was it a few weeks ago or was it a couple months ago? Eric and I kind of got interested.
It was maybe 4 weeks ago. It was in September when all of a sudden, boom, the issue everywhere was AI art. To the point where Drive-Thru RPG had to make a policy on AI art. And then if you used AI art, you had to declare that you were using AI art, which they never had such a policy before. And AI art would theoretically include things like the random one-page dungeon generator.
Okay, so there's a problem with that, and we'll talk about that. Please don't let me forget to talk about something, because they named certain things that if they name that, there are softwares that have been used in gaming that need to be named in that same contingency.
And now,
we'll get into that and explain.
We talked about this off.
Yes. And talk about that. Please don't let me forget.
We will definitely talk about it. No, we'll remember that, because you and I talked about that off screen, and you blew me away with what you knew about it, because I didn't even know that. So
that was a huge issue. Rob Conley.
There was a case this summer where a piece of AI art won a contest. Now, it wasn't a very big contest. It was a state fair that had a contest, but it got a lot of national pub because it was a pretty impressive looking picture, and the rules did not state you could not use AI art. So the guy just put a few keywords in there, downloaded it, fixed it up a little bit, and everybody just went ooh and ah and went crazy over it. And then they found out, oh, by the way, this is created by AI, and everybody got angry. They got angry. They said, oh, how dare you? By the rules of the contest, he could, though. It wasn't I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The information on that is a little. There's a lot more to that story than right there. First off, that person is a president. We can talk about that too. There's a lot more to that story. Okay, so first off, the gentleman in question happens to be actually in the gaming industry. He is the president of a gaming company in the Midwest. He entered a digital format category, the digital art category, in which he did state that he used machine-learned Midjourney in his entry, and apparently people did not comprehend what that meant, and it was completely digital. Now, that said, he put in many hours, like depending on which article I read, it was between 80 to 500 hours. Like there were different writings, like one person said 80 hours, one person said 100, somebody said 500. But he did go through, he created Midjourney, he went into Photoshop or similar Photoshop clone software, adjusted things heavily. He adjusted lighting, he cleaned stuff up. He then used gigapixel AI to upscale. For those who don't know what upscaling is, I will explain that shortly. And then he used a service to print it onto canvas, which many people use services to print their works onto canvas, which is completely legit.
Right.
Now, that said, it became a big deal. That is not the only time that it's been a big deal in recent months. There's someone who started doing a comic book, doing the first test of a comic book using AI art. There are some issues with the typography and a bunch of other things. In fact, a few people in one of my MJ groups talked about, well, I'm trying to do a short graphic panel or comic strip, and I explained here are some books like the Stanley How to Write Comics and various other books that I have read in the past on how to properly set your type and properly set your script as well as set your graphic panels. I'm by no means an expert in that. I was forced to learn it due to some stuff a while ago, and I tend to just pick stuff up. But something that a lot of people don't understand, because there are a lot of different arguments, and it is a very murky place, but there are a lot of arguments that based off of a lack of understanding of what AI art is. First of all, it's not artificial intelligence. That's not true. There is no sentience there. What it is a neural network machine learned algorithm. And while, yes, it does scrape billions, and I do mean billions of references for how something is made, it is no different. And I'm sorry, it is truly no different than a human being needing to use references as an artist. I don't consider, I'm going to get slapped by people who know me if they watch this, if I don't say this. They will, how do I say this without getting slapped and while saying it my way? I tell people I know a few tricks in Photoshop. What I mean by I know a few tricks in Photoshop was I got my first copy of Photoshop between 94 and 96 when a boy I knew at school who I got along with, who he heard I like computers, so he gave me an account on his Linux server. I became an admin. I ran IRC servers, et cetera, et cetera. I started the first computer club at my high school. So I've always been a bit of a computer geek. He knew I loved art because I've been a lifetime student of art. But being Asian, my parents would never let me get into art. But I've taken a lot of art history classes and various other things when I've had opportunities. So I've been playing with Photoshop since 1994 to 1996, and I say I know a few tricks. Brandon, Mark, and a few people who have seen what I do in Photoshop will tell you that I do magic. I don't do magic. I just happen to know how to use it because I've been using it for most of my adult life. A lot of what's in Photoshop has neural network algorithms, even before they started adding their neural filters. If you were doing your clone stamp, that's neural. For anybody who has ever been like, this is such cool technology, I get to handwrite something onto my tablet, onto my phone, and it'll digitize and know what I am writing. That's a neural network. Sorry. What it does is a neural network is designed to inspired by, because it is not, I'm also a neuroplasticity geek. So the brain is really crazy and weird. We try to mimic what the brain does through neural networking. It's not accurate. That's fine. But it's inspired by, it's a few jumps away. What it is, for example, let's say I write the number 9. And this is a really basic crash course. I am by no means an expert on the coding of it. I haven't been really into that, but this is a very basic crash course. Let's say I write the number 9. Step 1 of the neural network, it breaks it down into pieces. While 9 takes there's a loop up top and there's a line on the bottom. Our brains have to actually look at these things and try and figure out stuff too. It's like, how do you recognize a 9? The processes in neurons and neural pathways that go through trying to just trigger a 9 is in like thousands of triggers, hundreds of thousands of triggers in order to figure that out. Well, same with that, same with a neural network. Simply creating a program, and you can actually find programs, scripts online to show you the neural network of how a neural network would recognize the numbers 0 through 9 handwritten and turn it into digital and understand what number it is. And it takes thousands of triggers, of functions to trigger a single number. Now, and that's in the thousands, that's only like a 28 by 28 pixel. Now, if you're doing graphics, it's in the millions. And so this is why, like, for you have to have an understanding of how many pixels the engines are generating, because you will also need to understand how to adjust aspect ratio and tell it to do certain things. But it's like any other, it is a tool. And yes, just like tools in real life, we can do things that maybe people shouldn't, like referencing artists and saying, I want it to look like this artist's work. Well, to a certain degree, that's okay, to a certain degree. Trying to fully mimic an artist, not so okay. Where that line is very similar to real life. Every single artist, living artist, dead artist, etc., has had to use reference material of various sorts in order to create their art. For one example, one interesting thing, most people who actually draw faces, just about everybody who draws a face, unless they have a face in their mind, they have visual references. Do you know why that is? This is a little neuroplasticity thing now. our brains actually have trouble by trouble, I mean you have to be pretty neurodiverse and have very specific rare disorders, or they call it disorders, but rare traits in your brain, in order for your brain to actually create a unique face. So notice that people, when they dream, they know somebody is in the dream, but so a lot of times there's not that face in the dream. Or when you close your eyes and you want to try and create a brand new face, you can do that right now. Create completely unique face. You can't. Anything that you come up with that is not based off someone you know comes out blurry in your brain, no matter how visual you are of a thinker. And so for AI, the way that it does art, it takes a lot of references also, and it puts it together. How the creator of Midjourney put it during an office hour, I thought was very interesting, because he used to work for NASA for weather, and he talks about how Midjourney puts it together similarly to how a cloud forms. You don't really know how it does it, but it does it. And so instead of using direct references to artists, the pieces that Tenkar has of mine, I actually go through facial features. So I talk about the fact that I want high cheekbones. I will want an oval face. I want a mezzanine nose. For those who don't know what a mezzanine nose is an Asian nose. Sometimes I want a Roman nose. Other times I want a hooked nose. I have a piece I might have sent Eric. I believe I did, but it's based off a character for one of my gaming group. And he rolled up his character completely randomly. Yes, I did. He rolled up his character completely randomly. The 17-year-old boy, Eric, if you've got that access.
Oh, hold on.
17-year-old boy piece. He rolled his character up completely randomly and decided he wanted to roll his character's name. It's going to be third column down, far right there. Yep. So that piece. His name came up OQAME. And the whole group looks at him and goes, really? And so we're all like, well, what's this guy going to look like? And people are like, the guy's got to be a mix of indigenous and Asian. So so in my prompt, I have nothing about indigenous or Asian, but you can see both of those traits, that there is that Native American or indigenous Australian in his face along with Asian traits. And how I did that was simply dictating the tone of his skin, dictating wide, narrow lips, dictating the nose. I wanted a mix between a mezzanine and a hooked nose, and et cetera, et cetera. And I went through and I just went and looked online for a lot of different faces, and I just was writing down, okay, so this Asian person has this indigenous person has this. Now, if I mix those two and tested that out, and that's where I came up with that unique face that didn't exist. And I've used that same character because people are saying, well, you can't replicate a character. To an extent, you can, actually. It's called using a seed. And I've used that in a couple scenes. I'm actually doing something for a friend of mine, which use a few seeds. I'm by no means an expert on neural networks. I'm by no means an expert on MJ or AI art in general. I just tend to spend a lot of time falling into rabbit holes. So I've spent like 300 hours prompting, apparently, and I've spent about that much reading and studying on all the intricacies of how this works so that I can do individual things. There's a piece that Eric has that I call my butterfly armor. And this piece is actually a great piece to explain just how something works. It's going to be butterfly stained glass. Armor. Yeah, she's going to be. I think it's much earlier.
So you might want to close. Yep. All right.
That's those are some more recent pieces I was doing. But the butterfly armor, if you get to that, that's a great example, because when I put that together over a month ago now, the groups that I posted it to, everyone said, that's impossible. How'd you do that? And I taught some people how to do that. One of the things is right there. The impossibility of that piece is the fact that I actually spent about 15 hours reading up on the different types of stained glass in the world. By the way, did you know there are over 20 types of stained glass? I will tell you, I brain dumped most of them after I studied all of it because I learned that I wanted crackle and I wanted leaded. So I used a blend of leaded and crackle stained glass techniques and terminology to create that armor. So for people who understand what crackle stained glass and what leaded stained glass is, where you have that framing and trim, that's how I got the butterfly stained glass armor.
Wow,
so it's a lot of information you end up having to learn in order to do things if you don't want to copy off of somebody else's work.
Okay, so let's stop where we're at right here. So we kind of know the process here. This is basically, this is a skill like any other skill to be able to do this.
It's a skill.
This is not just some guy going bip bip bip. Oh, look, there's an awesome picture. It's actual skill. So, but here the controversy, well, not really controversy, but the issues that are here are the fact that, as you can see by looking at this piece of art here, this is absolutely incredible. It looks wonderful. It would be the cover of an adventure or a book. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. But it's something that can be created without somebody that necessarily has art skill. Now, if they have the skills that Alice has just talked about, they could do something like this. But you don't have to be an artist, correct, to do this? I mean, this is not something.
I did have to fix her face up in Photoshop. I did have to fix her face in Photoshop because, especially early on in the last 6 months, the AI faces have improved drastically. But in most AIs, you'll still not get proper eyes, and oftentimes you'll get a few things that are messed up in the face. So I had to fix her eyes. I had to fix her face a bit. I do have some pieces that I can show of before and afters of what raw output is versus what my output is. So, but yes, once again, when I'm asked if I'm an artist, I say no. I am a lifelong student of art. I have loved studying art all my life. I do it as a hobby. So if people have asked me if I'm willing to do some of these as commissions, I'm in general like, nope, you're not going to take that hobby away from me.
Okay, fair enough.
So I'm sitting here one day and I go, I want to make some art that looks just like that. So I put in the parameters for, like, let's say Errol Otis. I'm doing an adventure. I don't know anything about art. I'm not an artist, but I'm writing an adventure. But I'm too cheap to pay an artist. I'm a cheapskate. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get a Midjourney. I'm going to do it myself. And so I enter some prompts and say, I want art like Errol Otis. What would I end up with? Would I end up with art like Errol Otis? Would it be really bad? Would it be something that really needs to be worked on? I mean, what kind of curve do we have, or learning curve, for somebody like me that didn't know anything about it, just entered prompts in?
So that depends on your understanding and intuitiveness towards certain aspects. How do I put this way? I picked up on MJ pretty quick, but I deal with dozens of people in my friend circle who regularly send me questions and ask me for help and have a lot of trouble trying to understand how to get MJ to do anything remotely, even in the same country as what they want. And I explained to them, well, you need to place this here and that there. But long ago, I did programming very long ago. Back in the basic and then C++ days, I did that. So if you have some idea, so if you love art and you love programming at some point, if you have some idea of HTML programming, syntax, etc., put those together, you're probably going to be pretty into it. But if you are lacking on one side or the other, you're going to struggle in various ways, because structure matters. Structure on how you put stuff in matters. So, for example, what they will tell you, this is true for all the AI systems, start with general concept. Start with, so there are two things you want at the beginning. One is that you need to understand that the beginning of your prompt is weighted by the engine more heavily than the end of your prompt. At the same time, though, you want to start with generalizations, then go to specifics. So for me, I start by telling it, I want a portrait. I want this kind of portrait. So for me, a lot of times you'll see that a lot of my pieces aren't just the bust up, because I have a specific word I use, which I'm not going to share right here. I just don't want to. But I do have a specific word to tell it that I want that full full body picture, and versus just a bust up. And I then talk about the fact that, what this portrait is of. Then I will use the syntaxes that the system likes and tell it, well, after syntaxes, these are some of the details. I want that high cheekbone. I want a square face. I want an big upturned eyes. Upturned eyes being eyes that go up. Big round eyes are like eyes that are pretty centered this way. Downturned or almond eyes. Almond eyes are generally across. So there are different features. I will talk about mezzanine nose, Roman nose, hook nose, button nose. I will talk about the chin, whether I want sharp features. A lot of times when you're talking about drawing somebody and you're talking about sharp features, it starts from the chin up to about here is where that really gets defined. So when you start explaining it in the term of chin, etc., I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail on that. But I start telling it those things, and then I give it additional parameters. If I'm building a scene, I take something that I create, I create a picture that I then use as a seed. Using that seed, I then create the scene saying, I want this guy standing here doing this. And that way I can repeatedly use that same guy in future pieces, which I'm having to do for a friend right now. So I have a seed saved. And like, this number is very important in my account right now.
So let me stop you there too. So to relate this to why I think this is so fascinating, because everything you've told me shows me that you have a specific skill to make these look this good, that I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit down and do it unless I put a lot of time and effort into it. Why is this something that's very controversial with artists? Because I know, let's say you're an artist, let's say you're my age, let's say you're a 50-something-year-old artist, you've never done this before, and you see this art coming out, and you're like, I can't do that without learning a new skill set. I'm too old to learn a skill set. I don't want to. Is this something that you're seeing in the industry having to do with artists? Because a lot of artists I saw when this stuff started getting really, really big just a few months ago, they're like, well, this is going to put us out of a job because, Joe Schmo could just sit down at his computer and feed in a few words and boom, he's got all his art. He's not going to hire me anymore. From what you're telling me, it doesn't sound like that's going to happen, because it sounds like it takes a pretty specific skill set to actually make it look this good.
You can go and see there are millions of pieces getting prompted every day. And if you go into the supers group that I think like at least one of you I know are in, you see a lot of people asking me in my threads when I post up pictures, how do you do that one? How'd you get that one? How'd you get that one? I don't understand how you're getting these. And so obviously like when there's like 50 people asking, how'd you do that? And because they've been trying on programs, there's a certain skill set. That said, there's a very wide range of reasons why artists don't like what's going on. Part of it is a lack of understanding of what neural networks actually do. There is some misinformation and myths about what neural networks do. This is why early on I gave a crash course of how the very, very most basic elements. Because to go into, a master class of it, you can go and watch 3 hours on YouTube, which I actually have. I've watched about 20 hours of how neural networks work on YouTube and master classes, various places, just to really have an idea. But there is a very, very wide range of reasons. Some people, yes, I have a very close friend of mine who has been working as an artist for the RPG industry, as an independent artist for, I think he said 20 years now. And he's very worried about this and early on he was very, very grumpy about the fact that I started doing this. And then we started talking and he started watching my processes and he's like, that's like art from a totally different angle. I get it now. He now gets it. He now thinks I should be charging people when I make stuff for my friends. He's like, you should be charging people money. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. He's like, no, you should, because you're doing it from a different angle, but you are still putting in many hours. And so it took some time for them to understand it is a tool. And yes, like any tool, it can be abused, just like people can do a lot of bad things with art. You should be conscientious of that as you're seeing my pieces. I'm not copying another artist's style, but at the same time, I am referencing real world stuff and real world references, because that's a part of the reality of what art is that unless you're painting abstract pieces, you're referencing real world stuff one way or another. That every single artist has had references and inspirations and people who have influenced their work. That's reality. So same with a neural network. There's going to be that same reference in reality. A lot of times it's people are not okay with change. And so they will say things and do things to legitimize they're not okay with change. For example, when photography was invented, there was a huge backlash for years, very similar to the backlash going on for neural network machine learning art. I want to try and make it very clear. It's not AI. It's not artificial intelligence. It is not sentient. It is a neural network inspired by the way the human brain works. And it is machine learning over billions of resources. And so it got to learn a lot. It got to learn, what took many artists 3 decades to learn in the course of 3 months.
Right.
So choosing what engine you're using, choosing what API you're using can be really beneficial, because that determines the training. So like I've been keeping an eye on AI art for 5, 6, 7 years. I read articles about it. Every so often I would try it and I'm like, I'm disappointed. This sucks. I'm disappointed. It sucks. And then the most recent iterations came out a few months ago, and I just started jumping on. I'm like, okay, this is like levels above what the previous one is, because like, for example, the first DALL-E, now Crayon, I did use that early on, and I'm like, And now DALL-E 2 is very, very popular, but it's a big iteration jump. It's very different than what Crayon does. Like people who go to Wamba, I'm not a fan of Wamba personally. That's not for my style. Everybody has a different style. That's the other thing is I will not say my art is better. Like what I do is better than anybody else's. Art is extremely subjective. It is extremely subjective. It's just, some people like red, some people like green. Okay, cool. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But the Wamba style is not my style. And what it generates it a bit more impressionistic than a lot of the goals that I have for the pieces I use, because of the projects I do. I do a lot of it for my home gaming, for my characters. It's a great way for me to visualize my characters on what I want to design. And I have a piece that I can show you the before and after. Here, these two. These two are a great example. So that way you can post the before Photoshop and after Photoshop.
So now, Mike, I have a question actually. Could still be Photoshop. Now I have read that AI art is you can't copyright it, but if you photoshopped it, you've now made it unique or you've now put your own personal touch on it. I would assume that after the artist goes in and does Photoshop on it, that they can copyright it.
So I'm not a lawyer. Whenever I get sent anything to sign, I have friends that I go, want to read this over before I sign it? And they're always like, yes, because they know that I'm being smart about that. But what I will say is you can say that you can't be copyrighted, but there are multiple people that have already copyrighted their art without any Photoshop alterations. There are multiple people. One person who did a graphic novel got the first copyright. And they are a big deal. They recently made it on the news in Korea, actually, but they have a legit copyright in the US Copyright Office. So there are people who are already getting copyrights for it without any Photoshop alterations. Okay. Now, I just sent you a before and after of one of my pieces. It's one of the easiest ones for me to pull up because a lot of my other ones I have to jump through some hoops in my various folders. But that was a piece that I was doing to do for a potential character portrait for Brandon's character. The character ended up looking a little too old for what he was thinking of, so I ended up going another direction and doing a couple different other pieces, which ended up with what he wanted. So that's the before. And I would recommend zooming in on the face specifically on the before. Because it's not just the fact that I brightened it.
I'm trying to do my double tap and it ain't working.
Right. Okay. Right click and save it, and then you can open it manually.
All right. So hold on.
but you want to look in the face. But there's a lot of reasons, and I'm not going to say anybody's reasons are invalid for not liking AI. Some people don't like oil paintings. Some people don't like watercolors. Some people don't like pastels. That's just the way it is. What I will say is that the controversy makes it a little awkward for some people at the moment. Like, I stopped posting my stuff on my private Facebook feed because, for example, I have a friend who I shall not name, and I adore him. He's awesome. I'm very good friends with the guy. So he said, well, AI art doesn't take any art and any skill. I'm like, okay, cool. You don't believe it does. That's fine. This was a while ago. And you zoom in on the face and you see that there's some serious issues on the face. Nose and the eyes. Look at the eyes. The eyes are pretty messed up. Now go to my piece.
Okay.
So he said it didn't take any skill. Okay. So I said, well, why don't you give it a shot yourself? He did. And he's like, oh, all of this art's coming in garbage and mediocre at best. There's no way I could possibly ever use this in the art and the gaming industry. The gaming industry could never use this. I'm like, cool. So a few days later, I sent him 3 or 4 of my pieces. And he's like, oh my God, those are amazing. I said, I did those with Midjourney and then I Photoshopped them. He's like, oh, that's why they look soulless.
Uh-huh. I like the way they changed.
Like, oh, you just said they were freaking amazing. And it's like, oh, that's why they look soulless. And I'm like, okay. And then it was, and so now if you look at the eyes and the face and the nose,
yep,
the difference.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I went into histogram and I changed the lighting arc and such like that. So she's brighter. I also, the first one, she looked a little bit like she was bulimic or anorexic. So I changed her aspect ratio and plumped her up a little bit, changed her body a little bit to give her a more fuller figure, stuff like that. And reframed her position on the piece to give her a more centered, a central look, a central view. So, I did a lot of different things from one piece to the next. I know a few tricks in Photoshop. I know a few tricks in Photoshop. Just a few.
So let's catch up a little bit here. So, Dandelion, yes, I'm eating delicious food. Thank you for paying attention. Love you. So, Elle said, copyright lawyer says you can't, and somebody else asked you. Alice already said she doesn't know anything legal. So,
right.
Here's look. I'm going to bring this up. People can say whatever they want, but how should I put this? If you've got money, you can pretty much work laws however you want. If somebody that has a lot of money wants to copyright AI art, I'm going to go on record and say that they could probably do it because they'll figure out a way to do it. Because it's such a new and a dynamic area of law. I think this is not. I don't think there's any things we can say absolute here, one way or the other. You can or can't, because this is stuff that's still being figured out. I have a feeling.
There's a huge debate, and yes, the general consensus is you can't copyright it. Cool, except somebody already did. Somebody literally already did. I don't know beyond that, but the person posted blacking out the sensitive information, said, "Here's my copyright. Here it is."
So what's going to have to happen is, as in most cases, there's going to have to be court cases, and that's probably. Right. We're talking years in the future. This is going to go on. So right now we don't know, but I mean, that's what people say. Yes, you can't do it, but who knows what the future holds? We have no idea. Now I want to bring up a point where real quick. It just sounds to me, this is just me as a non-professional here. It sounds to me that I'm going to say real artists. I don't think, but I'm just going to say it as a way of differentiating somebody that does pen to paper or somebody that does what you're doing, Alice. That they didn't seem like they have a lot to worry about because, first of all, I'm looking at the styles here, and this seems to be a very individualized style. This is your style. I'm looking at these.
I'm choosing to.
Yes, well, so it's not like it's not like all this AI art looks exactly the same. It doesn't. Go to an AI art page, go to a Facebook page of AI art, go to Midjourney type pages. It all looks different depending on what prompts people enter in there. So I've seen people like, oh, all AI art looks the same. It all looks like that. No, it does not. It does not all look the same. It looks completely different. And like real artists, there's a style, and you have a style. And so if you're an artist that does pen to paper, I can see why you think you might be threatened by this, but you have your own style. This is somebody else's style. It's just a different style.
Well, Also, the one thing is, I am someone who I love art, and I am a big proponent of artists making a living wage. For me, people are like, Alice, you're not going to commission art from people anymore because of this. Okay, so I'm going to go over that real quick. For Alexa, after I had started playing the character a while and really fell in love with the character, I had not one, not two, not three, but 4 different artists commissioned for 4 different pieces for that, because I wanted all of their individual styles to see through their lens what the portrait would look like through their lens and through their style. I am someone who wants art to flourish, because just because there is this one interpretation of this character does not mean that 3,000 other artists could do that same character's essence, that vibe, that the look in their own style. The one problem that I do have that I love MJ for, one, I don't have unlimited money and I have thousands of characters I want to create. Okay, so this lets me do that. It also gives me something that next time I play a character that I'm like, oh, I really love this character, here's a portrait for reference, rather than, and people who've worked with me, who I've commissioned with, will tell you, when I give them, and I had one artist that she wrote back to me and said, you're the easiest client I had in the last 2 years, because I put together this whole booklet basically of reference material and sent it to her, sent her exact text descriptions, followed up by graphical descriptions, graphical images I pulled off the internet. These are her boots. This is her bustier. These are her gloves. These are her, I went through every single piece. I went, here's the haircut. This is an image of the exact haircut the character has. She's like, this makes it super easy. Now, I love, and I think doing that and having done that for so many years helps me prompt, because I'm able to communicate. This is something that a lot of people falter with. Yeah. You have to understand when you're dealing with machine learned neural network art programs that you're prompting, you need to stay visual. So if you're saying, I'm trying to get a thunder man, well, thunder is not a visual component. You need to say a man surrounded by lightning. Then you'll get a thunder man. But if you keep telling it, I want a man made of thunder, that's not going to do anything. It's not going to understand that, because thunder isn't visual. You need
there's a whole art to basically just giving the correct prompts. I mean, you can't, you have to know, because like you said, some people are like, how come my art doesn't look like yours? I don't know. And you're saying, well, because I know these certain prompts, and these prompts will give me what I want. That's part of the magic too, right? Is knowing which prompts to put in there.
Yeah. But also going back to the artist thing, so one, I don't have unlimited money. Two, I have several artists that I've worked with over the years that I can say I can't consciously say I can support them anymore, because I paid ahead of time and they never gave me my art.
Oh shit!
I have multiple artists.
Actually, a lot in the industry. Yeah.
One of those artists actually tanked a Kickstarter project by Josh Frost many years ago, because the artist had stuff happen. Josh Frost had apparently taken his Kickstarter money and put in several thousand with the guy. The art never came, and Josh Frost decided that he wasn't willing to release a manuscript of just the text. The project bombed, and Josh Frost stopped producing projects. Brandon and I were super excited about that project. I don't remember the name of it. I actually remember
that was Quantum, right?
Yes, Quantum. Thank you.
Yeah,
there's some fan put together stuff on it now, but yeah. And that same artist, I had actually private messaged Josh Frost and said, that artist just flaked on me 6 months ago, and I never got the artist's work after I paid ahead of time. You should know that before you go down that road. He never redirected. Cool, that's his choice.
Right.
I have a number of artists that I've waited for years and never got the art from. So sometimes being able to just have this, okay, well, if I put in 2 days, I can probably get the exact picture I want. Right. Because I need to go, well, I need to refine this side. Now I need to move this word 3 words up, move this word 6 words down, and then go into Photoshop and ding, 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 done.
Okay, so let me get
yes,
kind of weird
on
just
you. Another tool.
You guys stick with me. It's going to get weird at first,
yes,
but I'm
go
back
for it.
Okay. I have had a theory for years, and I've talked to people about this theory, is that when robot women are because if you study robot women, they're getting better and better and better. And I say robot women because for some reason men are the ones that want. I don't see a lot of women going, I want a robot man, but I see tons of men going, I'd love a robot woman for whatever reason, cultural, sexually, whatever. So as they get better and better and better, we're going to have robot women that are virtually indistinguishable from real women. And these will make some men very happy because they'll say, this is exactly what I want. I just want a robot woman. It's bound to it's going to ruffle feathers. It's going to change the dynamic between men and women. It's going to change a lot of things. So let's take that and move this to this art. You have artists, and I'm just going to throw this out there. If my artist friends want to get mad at me and yell at me, it's me. I'm the one saying this. Eric's not saying this. Dave said,
not me either. Not me either. I love artists.
I'm saying that artists can be. They're I always look at artistic types are they're just different. They're a little different, and so. One of the issues that over the years, game publishers, people I've talked to, people I've known, people I've worked with, have said is a lot of times artists are unreliable. And when they're unreliable, they can, like the example you gave, Alice, they can tank projects, they can put projects behind. I know of 2 cases where an artist was hired for a project and the person waited, and then the artist, to their credit, eventually, like 6 or 8 months later, said, I'm not going to do the project. Here's your money back. At least they gave them the money back. And they still gave your money back, but it put the person behind the 8 ball because they're like, well, now I have this project and I have no art done in it. So here you are. You've got Midjourney and you've got these tools right here, like you just said. Is this going to change the dynamic between artist and publisher, artist and patron? Because look, if I have a chance to, if I need artwork done and going to work with Mr. Flake over here, he's a great artist, but he's flaked out a few times. And I know people who have talked about it and said, yeah, sometimes he doesn't give his, and I'll tell you another thing. I know artists that don't give their best work every time. That doesn't happen. And like I said, I'm not besmirching artists. I have plenty of artist friends. I'm just saying it does happen where they don't give their best work. And I've had people had to redo projects to the artists because they said, I got the art from artist A and it just wasn't what I wanted. So I'm going to have to do artist B. What changes do you see between the dynamic between artist and publisher, artist and patron, whatever, because of this new technology? And I want to say I'm the one that said artists are flaky. Nobody else here said that. I said it. I own it. Give it to me.
I specifically only mentioned very specific situation. Yeah.
It's me. It's all me. But I'm just saying in that situation, like robot women will someday change the entire dynamic. Because my thing is, I look at it this way. There's a lot of guys now that the joke, they live in their basement, in their mom's basement for years. They could be perfectly happy in mom's basement now. Robot girl. I mean, they'll be like, why would I ever want to meet a girl? This one does whatever I want. So we're looking at the same thing with art. That why would I ever hire an artist anymore? I'm just going to go get somebody to do it on dirty.
Because so I'm not gonna. I don't feel comfortable talking about exactly how it's going to change because there's a lot of ways that it can change the dynamic between people. But what I will say is that as an accessibility thing, it makes art less of a luxury, and it gives everyone the ability to interact with it on various levels, whether yours comes out the way you want or not. So I sent Eric another before and after, and you can zoom in on the face and the skin, and you'll see that I really redid her skin. I redid some of her clothes too, but the most obvious will be her face, where the lips, the nose, and the eyes came out messed up, and the hair is really frazzled. And then I redid her face. I did her eyes, face, and skin, and her belly. I also redid her belly. It took a bit of work on the belly because I was like, what is with that line is just crazy. So that's the before, and then Eric can show you the after. And then I have I sent Eric some stuff that he can post that he can go see. But I can't say how it will change interactions, but one, it makes things more accessible. And two, besides being accessible, is oh shoot, I lost my train of thought on that. So your question is, where is it going to go? Besides making it more accessible to people, tools are always going to continue advancing. Yeah. And I really forget what I was going to say. So I'm going to let you guys talk for a sec while I try and remember.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I'm thinking, and I'm looking at the before and afters here, and now I can see very easily how people were like, with the proposed new cover for Labyrinth Lord, the new revised edition of Labyrinth Lord, right away, right? Yeah. As it was like, that's AI art, because when you look at the AI art that is not complete, it is like 98% there, and then the nose seems to be fall off, or one eye is drooping. It's like, pretty much as Alice has been saying, it isn't intelligent, so it doesn't, it can't realize that these things are just a little bit off. It just learns what it can from scraping millions and billions of pieces of artwork, and it needs that human touch, right, to make it complete. So personally, like with Drive-Thru being up in arms over the AI generated stock art and all this other stuff, I understand the issue, and I personally think that for portraits and stuff like that, AI is going to have a long time to get to the point where you can run a program and not go in and need the human touch to make it look human, make it look believable, to bring it across the uncanny valley, and get to the point where you go, that looks like somebody really should. But if you're talking about, I don't know, outdoor scenes, a hectic dungeon scene, I'm going to guess that you can do some of this stuff in AI art where some jackass like me can get a result that is usable enough as filler art in a zine, and people aren't going to go, oh, that's filler art. They might go, oh, that's some unknown artist of mediocre skill, as opposed to just some like rando hitting buttons. Trust me, I've tried to be the rando hitting buttons. My successes were very, very minimal, meaning they weren't.
So 2 things about what you were just saying. This goes back to the very beginning of the podcast when we were talking. One is the drive-through policy. Okay, I understand the drive-through policy, but you need to freaking put CGI Daz/poser art on that policy, which has been in freaking RPGs for over a decade.
You're right.
Because you know why? Because the same programs that they are saying for asset-based dungeon mappers are now listed as a requirement to be listed. So if asset-based dungeon mappers need to be listed, then Daz and Poser CGI work needs to be listed. And I will be very honest, if I know ahead of time there's Daz 3D or Poser art, the chances of me buying that piece is much, much lower. I will be very honest, because I aesthetically speaking, I am not a fan of that art. But I have been caught more than once, more than a dozen times, where the cover of the RPG is great. I open it up and every single piece is Daz 3D'd, and the person who's Daz 3D'd or posered the CGI piece didn't know how to pose a human being. So the arm is going like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that hurts just to look at. The elbow joint is like over here, the arm is down there, and no, everyone is allowed to love what they love and like the art they want. Aesthetically speaking, Daz and Poser CGI is not my thing, but based off the rules that they are coming up with, they need to list that as well. If they want to list it, I'm cool. If it's not handmade, blah, 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 that's fine. But you need to be concise and complete. Otherwise, it's wrong. As for machine learned neural network art, one thing I will point out, anybody here who draws in the audience will know this. The sign of a true artist, the joke about true artists is hands and faces are tough. You can't draw hands and you can't draw faces, because eyes are always up here or down there, or hands are always like gnarled in 6 different ways, right? Any artist will tell you, hands and face, hard. I actually learned a technique. I can't draw by hand like various I have some limitations, but I learned a technique that actually helps me make even eyes, which is that you don't draw eyes individually like a lot of artists do. You actually point out certain markers on the eyes, and then you draw one line on both sides, then one line on both sides, and that actually makes even eyes. It is actually much easier to do it that way. But eyes and hands.
It's funny. There's established comic book artists that have been drawing for 30 or 40 years that say to this day they can't draw feet or hands. They just draw within a glove or with boots on. They say I can't draw feet or I can't draw toes or I can't draw hands for whatever reason. So it's not easy.
Places that have their asymmetries, like the human face has a lot of asymmetry in it that is so minute, but somehow can be perceptible and make that more of a challenge.
I love that Rachel mentioned that, because once again, we can't, as people, generate faces, and something that we're taught, our brains can't generate faces, and something we're taught. I love what Rachel said. We are taught by our society that the more symmetrical a face, the more beautiful the woman is. Well, that's only true to a certain extent. And so that's only, go ahead, Mike.
No, I want to say, I've actually read an article on this. We're not just taught this, Alice. This is genetic. They found this.
It is. However, to a certain point,
symmetry is genetic. We look for, so it's the same thing we look for when men look for childbearing women. They want big boobs. I mean, the kind of thing that you don't know why you're looking for, but you are. They've done a lot of studies on this. It turns out that face symmetry in both men and women is something you look for subconsciously and on a genetic level in a mate. Now, what's weird is I actually like asymmetrical. My wife has a crooked smile. I love it because I love stuff like that. And I start looking, all the girls I've ever dated have a crooked smile. And so there's something in my brain that loves asymmetry.
You're not as strange as you think, because while it is genetic to a point, there is actually, and I've read some of those same articles, but while it's genetic to a point, there are some interesting things, and part of it's cultural, and part of it is actually quite cultural. There's some interesting things about that. But going to that, symmetrical to a point. Now, a lot of people that jump into neural network machine learning art, one of the prompts that they love to do whenever they start doing a person, you know what they love to say? Symmetrical face. And as soon as you do a symmetrical face, it actually looks completely wrong. No real face is actually completely symmetrical, because if you don't have minor asymmetries, the face won't look real, and it will look really weird. Your brain looks for symmetries on certain levels, but your brain doesn't look for perfect symmetry, because if you have perfect symmetry in a face, the face actually looks alien to your brain. No joke. Like, go find some of the people that did perfectly symmetrical faces, and they actually look like they generated aliens. It's actually really weird. And neuroscience is a really weird thing. We're just delving into it. So stuff like that. So having little specific asymmetrical quirks that you're attracted to is not that weird. Most people do. They just don't realize it. For example, a lot of people when it comes to upturned eyes, which is a common trait among Asians, upturned eyes have a natural asymmetry to them. And so so for people who are attracted to upturned eyes, they're naturally attracted to certain asymmetry, a certain type of asymmetry. The more symmetrical we are, yes, the more is theoretically attractive, but it only works to a certain point. And
right, because most people have eyes, like, first, if you look at people's face closely, most people, one eye is bigger than the other. And that's just everybody. Look at anybody, and you'll look at them enough, and their eyes are big. One eye is bigger than the other. So yes, we're not perfectly symmetrical. That would be weird, creepy, and robot. That would be Robot Girl that I'm talking about. that would be Robot Girl. But yes, so that is something that we look for, but not perfectly. We don't want too perfect. Is weird. Too perfect is creepy.
Well, yeah. Again, it's that Uncanny Valley issue. It's that's pretty much why the artificial women that Mike was referring to are going to be, they're going to be too perfect, and you're going to look at it and go, "Oh, that can't." No, you know.
Yeah.
But that's easy enough to make a robot girl that's not. I mean, the reason this all came about is because I was watching Cobra Kai, and a young actress, Peyton List, is in there. And Peyton List has kind of a crooked face. And so I saw somebody leave a review of it and say how ugly she is because her face is asymmetrical. And I thought, is that really, she's beautiful. I'm looking at her like she's gorgeous. Yes, her face is a little off. If you look at her, she smiles, it's crooked and weird. And my wife's like, well, you like crooked smiles? I'm like, I guess I do. But so I started researching asymmetrical and symmetrical faces. And yes, it goes back, like I said, it's a genetic thing, but too much symmetry, like Alice said, and we start looking at, this ain't right. There's something here that just turns me off, and I can't tell you what it is, but she's too perfect, or he's too perfect.
There's also, and this part, and also there's some interesting things, and this part's a bit more. I wouldn't say cultural is the right word, but there is a sociology term, and I forgot what the sociology term is. But women with square faces, square jaws, are considered to naturally look more manly, or in the case of certain actresses, they've been called horse-looking or horse-like, etc. as soon as they have a more square face and the natural shape of a square face. In men, square faces are desired, but in women, the most ideal women's face shape is actually oval. If you are round, you want to hide that round. If you are square, you really need to hide that square, because every man will look at you if you show your full square, and you will look like a dude or you will look like a horse face. Like, for example, there's very famous actresses that are known as horse face ladies because they simply have what is clinically known as a square face. Yeah. So the oval face is the ideal face. I have a very round face at rest, and I try and hide my face because it's not desirable by comparison. So going back to that and the prompted art, you're seeing that I go through and I have actively done a lot of this, where I'm talking about, this is the nose I want, that's the angle I want, stuff like that. But at the same time, a lot of people are hurting those artists that we love, because it's like, oh, I love art germ art, so every piece I generate, I need to tell it that I want it to look like art germ's art. Some certain artists. And that has made it more difficult for some of these artists, because a lot of these people's stuff are coming up as counterfeit their art, right, and on Google searches, and it's becoming rough because on some of these algorithms. And also, like, there are words, like I tried it for a while just to see what it would do. You really need to know what words do what, because there are some popular words that I avoid. For example, anything that's a render engine, I only do that if I want a certain texture on my superhero clothes. Why? Because if it's an Octane render or an Unreal Engine render, it means that it will do a 3D video game render. That means the skin is going to have that plastic, plasticky, pitty look, that, that little bumpy, plasticky look, rather than actual skin texture. And so if I want it for superhero clothes, that's great. I'll get it for superhero clothes. And then I have to spend a bunch of time fixing the skin because I want the superhero clothes, that texture. So I generally will avoid anything render, because Unreal Engine or Octane render that a lot of people use, you look at it and you're like, oh gosh, that looks like CGI art. That looks like, what AI art would be, what you would expect. And yes, Greg Lotowski, I'm sorry if I pronounced his last name wrong, but I know that he posted up an article about that happening to him. A lot of famous artists are having that happen to them, and I find that to be really sad.
Well, how long before that? I mean, like the example I gave, I'm sitting here, so I'm Joe Schmo, or I'm Bad Mike, and I'm writing a module. I'm like, you know what? I want Errol Otis art in my module, but I can't afford Errol, and I don't know how to get Errol. So I'm just going to prompt Errol Otis art, and I'm going to make stuff that looks exactly like Errol Otis art, but it's not Errol Otis art. Now, if I sit there and say, by the way, this is not Errol Otis art, this is art that looks a lot like him, but it's not. Is that wrong, or is it? I know it's more wrong to say this is. To not say at all, people assume it's Errol Otis and just not disabuse them of that notion. But is it actually wrong to say, yeah, I prompted Errol Otis art and this is what I got and it looks awesome?
So the question that I would ask you is, at what margin of an artist that uses a classic medium, a more classic medium, say watercolor, pencil, oil paint, etc. At what level of copying another person's art style is acceptable and what isn't? Because that's also been a question for a long time. We'll go back into various periods of art throughout our history, and we have artists that literally copied off their predecessor, copied off of the person that inspired them. And there are multiple artists with the exact same style. We have entire styles of art because one artist created it and then 10 billion artists copied it. We have Baroque, we have Rococo, we have Impressionist, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So at what level of that style is it no longer okay? Or is it just that this is going to become the Studio Ghibli style of art movement? Yeah. This becomes the art germ style movement. There's actually an artist, a Chinese artist, a number of years ago that was posting online, and a bunch of people liked his art, and it became his art became the Vovo style art because a bunch of people started copying his work, his style. And so it became the Vovo style, and there were like 200 artists in a collective that did Vovo style art. It all looked like his art.
Dandelion brought up the point I was going to bring. For decades, there's something in comics they call it swiping. Swiping is when you take a famous art, and Jack Kirby gets swiped all the time. Most times it's a homage, like, oh, that guy's drawn like Kirby because he loves Kirby. But there's also art that just swipe. They don't give credit. They're just like, yeah, I'm going to swipe. And there's been some scandals in the comic book world, over the past few decades about artists that basically traced other artists' work or did complete swipes. I mean, they just absolutely swiped their poses, their images, everything, and just to make their own stuff. But it's been a huge issue in comics for years. And you have what's called for instance, Joe Kubert was an artist very famous in the 50s, 60s, did a lot of war comics and also did like jungle comics, stuff like that. A studio called the Joe Kubert Art Studio that teaches you to draw like Kubert because it's such an incredible style. Just present it. It's a classic style. And so these guys have this studio and they learned how to do swipes of Kubert because he was such a famous artist. So it's something that's been around a long time. This isn't a new issue. No, it's just a new form of technology. It's not a new concept at all. Technology is just new.
Well, I think what it is, it's not a new concept. It is now an amplified concept because before you had swiping, you had copying, stuff like that, but it was through a small collective of people. Now it's become mass accessible. And so suddenly the percentage of people that do that and feel it's right to do that is still the same percentage of people, but it's just a larger volume of people.
Okay.
Well, it seems like it's more accessible. Like I said, depending on how accessible these methods of doing AI art becomes, because we're just at the very tip of this, right? I mean, this is something that's just basically at least entered my field of vision in the last year or so. So we're just really at the very beginning and tip of this in terms of what you could do with AI art. Who knows?
As for being the tip of it, like I said, I've been following it for a number of years, and the art generation, the way that it was being, the way that the neural networks were built, were not up to par for the style that what I was looking for in one. Whether it creates great, because I'm not a big fan of certain engines and certain creations. I work better with certain other ones because it gives me the style I want. And that's fine. That's what I want to do. But throughout this time, it has jumped. It has jumped an entire generation. But what I would say is that for anybody who thinks that this is really new technology, realize that this technology is something that you have been using for the better part of over a decade in various forms. For example, handwriting recognition, voice recognition, a lot of things are built on the same principles of the neural network. It's just built with different parameters now, but it's the same tech.
Also, say Elle brings up a point about sampling music, and this is still a huge controversy in the musical community because it's big. Hip hop's big. They sample a lot of music. Some people think it's awesome. It's great. So they've got to the point now where you can only sample X amount of sound. If you sample more than that, that's considered you're doing. Yeah, that's wrong. Don't sample more than I think it's a 3 second or 5 second sample. Then that's considered okay. If you can do a 3 to 5 second sample, you're okay. And there's been some really great songs with sample music. But if you do more than that, then they say you're ripping off the artist. So it's just a totally weird
Mike,
thing that just thought up. Okay, 3 seconds.
5 chord.
But that when I was first podcasting, I was told that was pretty much the general theory or the rule of thumb. If you're going to sample from,
is it the 4 chord or 5 chord? I forget now.
It was no longer than 4 or 5 seconds, because other than that, you may get into a copyright issue. I never sampled stuff on my podcast. Now, have I covered other videos? Certainly, but I always do it in an interactive way. I don't just put it up there. You see me stopping it probably every 4 or 5 seconds, annoying, and I'm interpreting and reacting to it. I am making observations because, and I know it annoys the living shit out of some people when I do that. Just play the damn video. But you know what? Out of respect to the original video, I have to transform it, or else I am literally, getting in a position where it's like, what are you doing? You're stealing. So yeah, but artificial art can go along or AI art can go in and take bits and pieces from everywhere. Again, you can say, like someone was saying that one of the AI systems allows you to set your parameters to Frazetta for a style. Yes. When you said Errol Otis, Mike, it was the same art that I would do if I was going to be putting an adventure together. Which classic artist do you want that you can't afford to have them do the work? Errol Otis is always what I liked.
A number of years ago, Brandon and I were I forget what we were watching or doing, but we discovered something interesting and we went and listened to them, and it's very true. So when it comes to music, this happens a lot too, and it's something I didn't consciously realize. But there are songs that you can play with the same exact 4 chords, and they sound very similar. If you listen to it and you listen to to where it is and what's going on, you will notice that they all sound very similar. And it's the fact that there is this 4 chord what's it called, phenomenon. And like, for example, 30 songs you can play with the same 4 chords. You can play the Beatles' Let It Be. And then on the other end, you can play Nickelback's Gotta Be Somebody. And then you can all the way go to Taylor Swift's Clean. All 3 of those songs. And there's a list of 30, and then I can find like different lists. Just go look up 4 chords and you can find lists of all these songs that just comparably have similar underlying things, elements and melodies. So it happens in music all the time without people realizing, because there are certain aspects of songs that can be relating it to plots and stories. Every plot's been written, just reskin, and
there's only 7. Yeah, there's only 7 plots, and the same. Well, for those oldies who don't remember this, George Harrison got sued for his song "My Sweet Lord" because it exactly copies everything from "She's So Fine" by the Chiffons, and he says he didn't even, and I believe him. He said that, you know what, I didn't even realize it when I'm writing this song, but I was rewriting the Chiffons' "She's So Fine." But nowadays, that happened 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. So now, imagine we've had 50 more years of music. It's almost impossible not to copy entire song structures, because there's only so many ways you can arrange music. I mean, there's just so many things you can do with music before you start repeating the same chords. Now you can use different words, but at that point, it's still using the same chords. Like there's some examples, Ghostbusters, and I Want a New Drug. But the Ghostbusters is a real famous one, because Ghostbusters, there is a lot of songs that sound like Ghostbusters.
Yes, there are.
I've seen some videos, because dun, 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 and it goes all the way back to freaking classical music. I mean, there's only so many things you can do. There's only so many variations on the theme, right?
Without it sounding like cat scratching a chalkboard.
No, so we're not yet. But I mean, so what point do we get to? I mean, we're not there I guess we're not there with art yet. I mean, or are we going to get there with art? Where, oh yeah, that's already been done. That's been done. That's been done. Let's just redo it. I mean, look, you have styles that nobody, before. If you look at let's just look at pulp art. If you look at the early pulp art, it wasn't really good. It was very stiff and it was interesting, but it wasn't great. But when you had artists like Frazetta come along, they changed the whole, because his stuff was just so different than the art that was that usually was on the cover of a book. If you look at the covers of books up to about 60, and then all of a sudden Frazetta, boom, everything is different. Everything's different. People are like, oh, I can do that now. Then all of a sudden everybody was copying Frazetta. Then you have all these artists that like, well, I want to be like Frazetta too. That's awesome. I don't want to go like the original type art. So you have these trendsetters pop along every generation, 2 or 3 a generation, that just change art forms so much that they become the people that are copied. Then happens when this is, are we going to have people copy AI art? I mean, somebody can come along someday and say like, I want to do AI art like Alice does it. Because I love Alice's AI art. That's what I want to do now. I mean, is that what we're going to eventually run into?
Well, go look up the history of anime art. The original anime artist, he was a caricaturist, and I believe that he was, I forget what it was, but I want to say it was like political or cultural satire stuff that he did or something, but he was a caricaturist. And then people were like, hey, that's really cool art. And then just it turned into what we now know as anime, that classic anime style, big eyes, the V. That's a style, but he was just a cartoonist originally. So I mean, there's a lot of this happening in the real world, and if you don't bury your head in the sand, you can find billions of examples of that. Now it's just happening on a very, very, very different scale suddenly. So it's interesting, it's weird.
Well, I would say you won't give us your predictions of the future, and I understand why. But so I'm going to let Eric have the field. So Eric, what do you think is going to happen? What is? So we have AI art that looks as good as some of the stuff that Alice has been showing us, just absolutely incredible, like photorealistic, amazing art. Where is this going to go in the gaming industry?
If you're going to be talking about the quality of art that is Alice's final work, which probably requires an input of time and training that's going to be comparable to an artist of some quality, I think it's going to be a wash in the end. If you're talking about the randomly generated art that Tom, Dick, and Harry are going to put together and throw into their latest game, and maybe that's going to be art that's going to be like behind the text as part of the splash, it's part of the layout, or it's going to be the marginal art. It's going to be art that is not going to be attributable to anybody, and nobody's going to be looking that closely at because it's scenery. I think it's going to replace some of what would be a normal pen and ink or computer human artist. I think they're going to lose out on that stuff because you can probably get more of what you want with the few, a little time put in with somebody with minimal training to get wilderness settings, outdoor settings, a dungeon setting, maybe what you learn. But to get people, to get portraits are going to be hard. Portraits are going to you're going to need somebody who is trained, skilled. It's an art form unto itself. I don't think those dynamics are going to change too much because it's not going to be a jackass like me flooding the stock art on drive-through with a bunch of computer-generated art that you probably don't want to zoom in too much before you see the defects. I think that's where it comes down to. So I don't think we're at the point yet where it's going to be hugely influential, just like artificial writing or AI writing, artificial intelligence writing that they're talking about. I don't think it's going to be the point to where it's going to be able to do a New York Times bestseller. I think that could you do something good enough for a low end children's book, or something like that? Sure, or maybe something that's good enough that you could go in and rewrite it as a professional author and turn it into something. But I think we're a while away. There's a human touch, that human magic that you need to bring that spark of life to art. That's my opinion. And I think Alice shows you can do it with the AI starting it, and then the human touch comes in and finishes it.
Sure.
Sure. And not everybody has that.
No.
What I will also mention is that every generation, every era has a different definition of what art is, what artists are, and what musicians are. And this if you go down to music, because music is probably the most relatable for everybody in the current situation. Every decade you hear, oh, my decade when I was a kid, that was the best music ever. Next decade, oh my gosh, this decade's music sucks. It's so garbage. I'm really weird in that I like music from a lot of eras, and my primary playlist gave one of my friends. He literally said during game, Alice, can we please change the music? Your music is giving me musical whiplash, because I had KMFDM played right after a waltz, a classical waltz, and then right after that was Big Daddy Voodoo singing "Cruel Spell," and then just I had it was just every single musical genre from 1400s to now. And he's like, can we please change this?
Yes.
Every era has different definition of what an artist is, what art is, what musicians are. And look at all these artists that we now prize, and they could not make a living. They committed suicide. People mocked them. People hated their work, blah, blah, blah. And now we're like, oh my gosh, this piece is worth $3 billion. It's like, yeah, well, they saw nothing. they committed suicide because everybody mocked them for their new style.
Well, my wife and I, our big joke is that if Mick Jagger was on American Idol, they'd boot him off the first time. And the guy's made billions of dollars in the industry, but he's not what people look for now in a lead singer for a band. They go, that ugly, weird looking guy, he sings weird. No, you vote it off. Boo, thumbs down. And he'd be just kicked off American Idol first segment. But because chase change and what we look for as ideal changes also through the years too. Exactly correct. But to me, at least it seems to me like AI gives you the best of both worlds. If you want to do an old school style, you could do an old school style with AI art. You could make like our example we keep using, the Errol Otis art. You could look at there's a guy right now that I've got doing some work for me for some artwork for some different projects. He did something for Tom and I, and he did something for Rocky and Ian. But I like his stuff because I told him it reminds me of David Sutherland. That's not an artist a lot of people copy, because a lot of David Sutherland's art is considered very dated now. It's just not the style now. But for what we were doing, which was old school, it fit in perfectly. It was exactly what we were looking for. But it's not, like I said, it's not the aesthetic now. People don't. Watson is not putting ads out for David Sutherland style artists. Let's just put it that way. That is not what they're looking for at all. And I'm curious. I guess I'm just curious because I wonder how completely you could create some of these classic styles. And I guess I'm just gonna have to delve into this more because like I said, I wonder, could you do a module illustrated by a faux Errol Otis and make it look so Errol Otis that you would think Errol Otis drew the art?
If you actually need to have some understanding of, you actually need to have some understanding of Errol Otis art. For example, I don't think I could, because I don't know Errol Otis's art as well as I'd like. I can just say it looks, by Errol Otis. Yes, and there will be similarities. Yes, but if you want it to be intrinsically similar, there are certain styles that you will have to add terminology wise on where his influences come from in order to do it. And also, just so you know, like not every piece I sent Eric is photorealistic. I have 2 pieces. There's a green man. There's a green radioactive superhero, Eric. He should be pretty obvious. He's very comic book style, and that's done for John's character for the superhero game we're playing on Tuesdays. And you can see he is very radioactive green comic book style. Hold
on.
Okay.
I had to close out my Facebook tab because there was just too much stuff going on with PMs. I was just like, oh my God. So,
well, that L brings up the problem. Every artist thinks they'll be the next Andy Warhol. What's funny is that just what Alice was talking about, how our concept of art has changed. That the 60s and 70s were this big rebellion against what we consider classic art. When you had Andy Warhol type art, you had stuff like, Piss Christ, which was a cross in urine, and people would put a turd on a pedestal, and that's art. And nowadays, here we are 40, 50 years later, and that was considered super modern. Now everybody's like, yeah, they just kind of roll their eyes when they see, stuff like turd on a pedestal, and like, okay, you're just trying to make a point now. And yeah, that looks awesome. That's very comic realistic art. So I love that.
And then if you go 2 over, there's also one that looks a bit like a lot of people will have different references. So I'm not going to say, what he looks like, but you'll have 2 over where he's fully masked, because there are a lot of different characters that people can see in that one, in the way that I did it. But what I will mention is, if you think that's changed, Mike, last year, maybe it was the year before, somebody sold an invisible statue for millions of dollars. They had an invisible installation for an invisible sculpture, and the owner gets a certificate saying that this was installed, and it sold for like just under $1 million. Actually, I think it was 900.
Some people have too much money, Alice. They have way too much money.
It's still,
they just have money. That looks great too. That's awesome.
And as for maps right now, I've tried doing a few RPG maps, and I have found that it definitely has issues with what I want out of a map. I'm interested in seeing where the AI art goes with that, where the machine learning goes with that. And then the other thing I sent Eric was if you want to see something very different, because I know I sent him a lot of portrait art, but a while ago, I made a joke to one of my MJ using friends, and he said, "Oh, now you have to do this." So the next day, I created an entire series of Tron elements, so Tron motorcycles, specific types of Tron motorcycles, like the Gen 2 and all these different, and the Tron Lightcopter and such like that, all done as if they were made out of stained glass. And
I see the series. Okay, hold on a second.
Yeah, so that's something very different in a very different style. But I spent a day just creating all the different vehicles and the different elements as Tron in stained glass. And again, I had to go and learn what terminology to use for stained glass, because otherwise it would just give me a painted piece of just flat stained glass rather than making models out of the stained glass. So I had to go and learn how to tell it each thing was made out of stained glass and not just a stained glass piece of it. So it's, there's a lot of things you can do with it. It's a lot of fun. I had so much fun. It was just a fun little joke challenge, and I did it, and it was really fun. So, and then I started doing like all sorts of weird stuff. Very abstract. Yes. The terrain has gotten better, and abstract stuff, I still like doing abstract stuff. Like once in a while, when I'm just like tired of having to think on a proper prompt, I'll be like, this is a da 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 da. Like the other day I said, Lala Twiddle as a cosmic elemental mage. And the things it came up with were very cool abstract pieces. Like it has a little gnome eye at the bottom looking in, and there's like all the flames and different elements. And it was just really funny. But every so often when I'm sick and tired of thinking, I'm just like, let's see what it comes up with.
Yeah, I really do like that.
What I sent Eric were the standard. No, actually, I might have sent Eric the high definition files. But I went and upscaled and made them all 300 DPI. I don't know if I sent Eric the 300 DPI. He might have gotten the raw 72 DPI files. But when I do stuff, I tend to go into 300 DPI. And that's something else that the program outputs is 72. So you need to know how to mess with the dimensions on that.
You got an important question there, Mike.
Oh,
Zach
I'm sorry. I was.
Hi, Zach.
Carry on. Okay. Yeah, Zach. Don't interrupt my show or anything. I'm not doing anything important right now. So yeah, that's.
Nope, Mike's not doing anything important.
What an a-hole! What a jerk! What a narcissistic lunatic! I'm at the Clarion now. I'm on the 8th floor. Somebody wants to come by my room and drop off some food. Well, I better not give you my room number. My fans are here. I don't know what might happen.
Everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, he doxed himself."
They tear the wall down and try to get to me. Oh, and say hi to Alice. Yeah, have you been? You see, he pops in. I've been watching the show, but he wants to pop in and be important. Like, oh, hey, Alice, what's up? Well, guess what? Alice would have liked if you'd watched the whole show we did. So,
well, yeah.
For Alice. I'm putting words in Alice's mouth, definitely. Yes, I am.
Don from Wizard Tower Games has a question. Alice, do you believe when a piece is made with AI, how should the attribution be listed?
Oh, good question.
That's a really good question, and I don't want to stick, into other people. This is how you need to do it. For me, I think that saying, I did this on Midjourney. Yes, I went through and, when I attribute what I post, I say I did it in Midjourney, and then I made changes in Photoshop and Lightroom and stuff like that. I'm always very forthcoming about where I started my piece. Some people feel that they have the right to simply. There are people who take direct MJ outputs and then put their watermark or signature on the piece. That's actually a growing movement. That's their thing. What I do is I say, this is my thing. I did it through this. I have, for me, one thing that I am really scared of doing, but I have learned that I need to do, is I actually do need to pull up my old watermark that I used to put on pieces that I did, because people start taking your pieces and just saying that it's theirs to try and drum up likes and drum up views. And I have had that happen to people I know. And one of them actually messaged me and said, hey, your piece was just found on this person's feed, and they said it was theirs. I corrected them and said that you did this prompt and you did the Photoshop work on it. They're like, thanks. And I'm like, but that's kind of sad that the person felt the need to take my piece and say, I did this. Right. And I'm like, well, you have, I actually spent 6 hours on that piece, because that piece was something that was very close to me, close to my heart when I started on down that road. So the question is, should I start actually marking my pieces again? I do put post-production into it, but at the same time, I would still say, hey, I generated this on MJ and then I did stuff to it. That's me. Everybody has a different opinion. I'm not going to say their opinion is wrong. I'm not going to say you have to do it my way. I'm very forthcoming about mine.
Fair enough. Donna,
it's very, very controversial. AI art is a little scary. I love doing this because I like seeing this stuff. And it's actually been very therapeutic for me to do it. So it's been a bit of it's great. So for me, I'm going to keep doing it.
God bless.
Well, it looks good. Your stuff is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and it's
there's a lot of talent.
It isn't just like, some people just do portraits. Some people, you do a little bit of everything, and that is, it shows you not just how far you can push the AI parameters, but it shows how well-rounded you are when it comes to this, personally.
I see people who post up, well, getting this is impossible in MJ. And the next thing I do is the next free time I have, I'm like, let's see how impossible this is. Nope, that didn't work.
It's a challenge.
And I like to build the impossible prompts. So, yeah. I think that there's I think that just like real life art, you have the same elements going into this as real life. And I'm glad that I was able to, help temper some, because thank you, Dandelion. I'm glad that I was able to help temper some views, just give some perspective. I'm not saying this is the best. I'm not saying this is the only way, but they're tempering the perspectives and
just the stuff that Alice and I have been sharing back and forth, because she's been sending me art for the past month or so, has made me realize that this is talent like any other talent. Because I before I was thinking that me, I could sit down and go, oh, I want art for my Kickstarter. I'm gonna just enter a bunch of stuff mid-journey, and boom, 3 hours later, I've got all the art I need. It's just not like that. And then Alice made me realize that there's an absolute skill involved here. Yes, you could probably do that, but it's going to be crappy art, just like a crappy artist would draw crappy art. It's going to be crappy mid-journey art. So yeah, I don't think regular real artists are in a lot of trouble from this, unless publishers just really feel like they need to save a buck and they're just going to go cheap. But if you don't have much skill in this, it's not going to look that great. I mean, some of the stuff looks okay. I've seen people generate stuff off the cuff that I thought looked okay. Then I've seen some of those stuff that looks terrible. Even some of the stuff that Alice showed us before she did her magic on it, it didn't look that great. It looks, you start looking at it like, oh, there's some stuff off there. I remember one piece of art you showed me, Alice, had the eyes looked really bad until you fixed them. It wasn't one of the ones you showed us, but it was another one where the eyes looked really odd, and then you fix the eyes up and they're fine then. So I mean, yeah, that there's definitely a skill set involved. So but people are going to get better at that skill set. People like Alice are going to be like, hey, I can mid-journey art and I can do. To me, if you're putting the work hours in, you should be able to charge as much as, I don't know if you're going to save money, right? By using an AI artist, you shouldn't be able to save money because they're putting the same kind of hours in. So you can't say like, oh, well, you didn't really draw it. You just did AI stuff. So I'm not going to pay you as much. It's like, what? I just spent 5 days, 10 hours a day working on this. So no, I don't think so. Yeah, I'm not going to get less of this.
I'm terrible about charging people anything for anything I do, and some of the people here know that. I will go, can you not pay me for that? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, I feel bad though. So someone watching, or he may have already left after popping in, but but also for art, it's again so subjective. Like if you look at Jacob, he churns art out. He can draw a piece. I've watched him draw a piece live from beginning to finish in under an hour. And so some artists draw really, really quickly. Some artists draw, take a few days. Another friend
Eric and I have seen Jeff Easley take paint and a canvas and in one weekend draw paintings that sells for $5,000. So I mean, but he's just, some people are just that talented. I mean, amazingly, insanely talented. Other artists look at Jeff and just throw up their hands like, I can't do what he does. So yeah, you do have people like that are that good. They could just do things that nobody else could do. But I think most artists have to struggle, right?
Yeah. And what's your definition of artist? Because definition of different people have different definitions of what an artist means. Another friend of mine, he considers, any tool other than pen and pencil to be weird and wrong, because that's what it should be, is, hand drawn, every detail. And for him, it takes 500 hours sometimes for some of his commission pieces, because he wants that every detail. Everybody has a different range. They're different. Some people will say, if you've ever been paid for your art, you're an artist. By that definition, I've been an artist since I was a teenager, because I did a bunch of abstract pieces and then got shown in a small little gallery and sold $100 worth of pieces. Okay, nice. It was just abstract art that I was just letting out my fury on. So whatever.
There's the thing about writers. If you've ever written a title and you written it in between and you wrote the words at the end and you sold it, you're a writer. I mean, somebody bought it, then guess what?
But different people have different varying definitions of it. For me, like there was this poll about, what do you consider yourself, people who use MJ, and a lot of people call themselves artists. My post is, I'm a lifelong student of art. I love art. I'm a lifelong student of art, and I'm a huge geek. I love computers. I love tech, and I love gaming. So it's the perfect storm for me. The lifelong student of art and a gamer, geek, love everything tech, love falling down rabbit holes. Give me a rabbit hole, I'll fall down it for 15 hours to 100 hours. So, yeah, see, he's an artist. He sold his own first video. He's an artist. So, I mean, everybody has a different definition. It's what you love to do. For me, I'm just a lifelong student. I'm not an artist. I'm not a writer. I'm just a lifelong student, dabbling in different things as I go through journey.
Well, you're being very
by no means an expert on anything. I have in D&D what's called the jack of all trades skill. Apparently, I've been told this by many people. But I'm a jack of all trades and master of none. I'm
there
not
you
a specialist.
go.
Not a specialist.
I thought you were a gnome. No, I thought you're a gnome. Come on.
I am a gnome. I'm a gnome with a jack of all trades skill. Yeah, I'm a gnome with jack of all trades. I like to learn about a lot of random things. So happens to come in handy sometimes. I pick up random skill sets that come in handy. And in the case of Midjourney, 3 different skill sets that I have happen to work together very well, and I have some fun with it.
Nice.
Oh, somebody said something earlier. I was going to answer and I forgot it. Somebody talked about the arts, the map styles of dice, whatever. So I had a friend of mine. She is an architect, and she does a lot of architectural drawings. And we were just shooting the shit one day, and I showed her. She said, "I wonder if I could ever do stuff in gaming." I said, "Well, you like maps and stuff in cartography." And so I showed her Dyson's maps. I said, "Could you do maps like this? If you could probably do really well." And I didn't think anything about it. The next week, she said, "Hey, I did some maps just to, she basically did it as a palate cleanser, just something to kill some time and to free her mind." And she shows her the maps, and they're really better than Dyson's maps. So I was like, okay, yeah, you could make money in the gaming industry if you wanted to. It's like, I'm not really interested in it. She's like, I was like, those are really, really good maps. So, and I know a couple guys who we know, friends with, I won't say their names online, that personally, I think they do Dyson better than Dyson does. I mean, honestly. So, yeah, I mean, that's maybe a skill that humans still need to do. I don't know if you could program a computer.
No, the one engine generator does a pretty good job of doing Dyson.
That's true. That's true.
And
who's is that the one we use?
Yes.
Yeah, those are pretty good. Those are really nice. Yeah.
Speaking of architects, so when I was talking about the fact that there is the fact that knowing, like writing, write what you know. And so for what I develop and the pieces that I do, I have to go and really know how to communicate different features of what I'm doing. So if I want, certain faces or certain styles and such like that, I don't understand architectural terms, but there's a whole group of people that are actual architects that have now taken to Midjourney and other AIs that are using them to create new architectural architectural designs and blueprints to inspire them for their daily jobs, because they do know the terminology and they go, well, use this term and that term and that term, and then they can build off of that. That's not a rabbit hole I've fallen down, but hearing that, I'm like, I wonder how I can make it understand mapping.
Wow.
But there is a collective doing that now. So
interesting.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Well, that's why this is so interesting to me. I think this is the future, man. I just think this is going to have a lot of impact on what happened. And as gamers do about most things about it, we'll have arguments about it because gamers like to argue about everything from THACO to which edition's best to whatever. And so I'm sure there'll be a lot of arguments. It just becomes more prevalent. And some people say, "You're not an artist, man. You're just like copying stuff," and then, so it'll go back. It'll be all over the place like most things are. That's not the OSR. The OSR is old school Renaissance, not old school rules. And remember those fights, Eric, about that? What did OSR stand for? And boy, people, oh God, they got
old school RPGs, old school rules, old school Renaissance, old school revival, old school,
resurrected. I don't know.
Oh, God.
People would
you
have
don't have to limit
fist
to
fights over that.
You don't have to limit to gamers. You can limit it to people. People, for some reason, like to argue. Even when they're wrong, they will laugh and say that they're right until the end. Even when you put visual proof in front of them, they're like, "No, that's missing. That's wrong." 2 + 2
I don't know
equals 5.
anybody like that.
2 + 4. Here's the evidence. No,
I don't know what you're talking about, Alice. This is weird because I don't know anybody that does that kind of thing. So that's odd that you're saying that. Yeah, I don't know anybody. Do you know anybody that does that, Eric?
Intentionally obtuse and
no, that describes half the people we talk about on our show. Good Lord.
I'll be very honest. When Mike asked me to come do this episode, I was like, oh gosh. And then I talked to 2 of my friends and they said, I need to do this. And I'm like, you do? Why do I need to do this? And both of them were artists. And they said, because you have, in their opinions, they said that I have the ability to kind of temper the controversy on it a little bit. And because, there is a lot of lack of understanding adds to polarization in theory. So I came on with the intent to temper some flames. And so I saw that for at least one person, I did that, which makes me happy. Whether in the end they like it or not.
No, I know I wanted you on the show because we've been going back and forth of this online, you and I, for about a month, showing me pictures. And that's when I realized that, artists don't need to be afraid of this because this is something, it's a skill like any other skill. Yes, no, Joe Schmo cannot sit down at the computer and say 5 words and have a piece of art. It just doesn't it's not that easy. And so you maybe realize that this is work. And so it's not going to put a bunch of artists out of work because it's just going to be some idiot that's dumb enough to think that, I don't need artists anymore. And I'm just going to feed a bunch of crap into Midjourney and the art's going to look like shit. It's going to look like crap. And, it's going to be free or cheap or whatever. And it's going to look like crap. And that's going to happen a few times. But yeah, for the most part, you maybe realize that this is a skill like any other skill. And it's not that easy to do. I won't be able to do it to do my Kickstarter someday. I'll have to hire Alice to do it for me.
For shame, Michael. For shame.
I can't. Yeah, I won't be able to do it. I just can't handle it. Just can't do it. Alice, why do your friends hate you? Why do your friends? You don't think your friends hate you? Do they hate you, Alice? I don't think so.
Why do my friends hate me? That's a good question. Because
would you stop beating your wife? Yeah, that's not a loaded question.
But yeah, one of those friends, he's actually an artist that at first really didn't like MJ, and as I talked to him more and more about what I was doing and such, it really grew on him. When he tried it for himself, it wasn't his thing. He didn't like doing it himself, and it's not his medium at all. He's like, kudos to you for doing it. I hate this. I'm like, cool. You don't have to. So
I know. So I buy it for.
And yes, Al, very true.
I buy, sell, and trade games since 92, 94. My wife and I figured out the other day. I can't remember, but early 90s. And one of the now everybody does it. Everybody gets on eBay and sells a game collection. People didn't do that back then. They didn't sell. They thought games were just different. And the same thing with comics. And I used to get this comment a lot on forums: is that how dare you resell games? Games are meant for people to play. You should just give away your extra games. I got that. I got hatred from people because I would buy and sell and resell games. And their idea was the information is free. You need, or in that respect, that you just should give this away. These are games meant for people to play. They are not meant to be sold at a profit, no matter how rare they were. And people adamantly believe that. And obviously, I don't think you get anybody saying that now, but for a while, there was a lot of people that would say that. They would absolutely said that to me, said it to my face, said, you're wrong by selling games. How dare you resell games? That's ugly. That's horrible. And I think that you'll probably see the same thing with this until, it's around for a while and people realize what's going on. They're going to say, well, how dare you create AI art and resell it and this and that. And it's just something that's going to, people's perceptions are going to change as time goes on.
Yeah.
People talk about selling games.
There will be change, but there will also not be. There are people that are going to just be very stubborn. I think there's going to just be people that are stubborn. I'll leave it at that.
There's people that still play first edition D&D and think the only way to play it is with the first edition DMG Player's Handbook and Monster Manual. And damn you for even suggesting
weapon speed.
Weapon speed. Yes, you use weapon speed. Of course you do. Gary wrote that in there. He wrote it in there for a reason. Damn it. He wrote the armor versus weapon chart for a reason. If you don't use that, you're not playing real D&D. Screw you.
You're not playing with segments. Yeah. God damn you.
Talking about different styles, I just sent Eric a picture that he can share of a Funko Pop that is custom designed Funko Pop by an AI, because I decided to see if I could get my superhero in a game, because I had a character that an alternate universe version of this character coming from a chibi land, and I'm like, what's a good chibi representation? And I decided Funko Pop. That Funko Pop looks freaking real. Like, I could go to the store because I've got a ton of Funko Pops on my shelf. And I'm like, that looks like a freaking photograph of a Funko Pop that I could buy in the store, but it's custom to my portrait.
Wow.
I couldn't believe that.
Awesome.
I couldn't believe how easy that. How to do that.
This guy said a bigger threat to artists by teaching the AI complex thought to. Yeah, I know. We called that movie The Terminator. Yes, we saw that in 1984. We've known for a while that AI it has possibilities that are not so friendly. So, yeah, I think the cat's out of the bag on that one. I think bad things could happen.
Befriend the great overlords now.
Be friendly to the robot overlords, and they'll remember you. So
yeah, exactly. So everyone,
yeah, it's interesting. It's a very interesting, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this for a while. I'm sure what's going to be interesting is when see what the established game companies do and how much of this art they use. I know there's been talks to some of the game companies. I know people are in about, what are we going to use? What are we going to do with this? I know people that have created a ton of stock art through Midjourney already, that they've used Midjourney to create pages and pages of stock art. And there's people online that make a living selling stock art. And they're like, well, hold on a second. This guy now has, he took him a weekend. He has 1,000 pieces of stock art. And it took, how long is it going to take me to draw that much? So I've seen that happen. So,
well, also people are making Photoshop brushes, Photoshop assets, vectors. For people who do know these terms, sorry, I know that not everyone does, but they're making, they're brushes, they're making vectors, they're making all sorts of things. There's a lot of potential there for whatever you want to do.
I read a really interesting article about I'm sorry, go ahead, Alice. I'll talk after you.
You go, Mike.
Oh no, I was just going to say that I read an article that they have contests. There's a contest every year, and I'm going to ruin this whole story. But basically, there's this concept in science about AI is not AI, perfect AI until it's indistinguishable from what a human can do. And so far, computers have not been able to produce things that are indistinguishable. And one of the interests is writing. So what they do is every year they have people that create computer programs that can write. And they have this award, the first computer program that can ever write a story like a person could actually write, and you can't tell the difference, wins this award. It's never happened. This contest has been going on for like 20 or 30 years because machines always get something wrong. And you read some of the examples, and it sounds like a Nigerian asking you for money. There's always something a little off about it. It just sounds like somebody's speaking a second language and not really, talking the right way. But you could tell over the years they've gotten better. The stories have gotten better, but they're still off. They're off enough to where you're like, yeah, a machine wrote that. That doesn't, it doesn't flow properly. It doesn't make sense, and things happen. So far, the AI overlords have not been able to replicate human thought enough to write a story. But
has not passed the Turing test.
Not the Turing test. Yeah, that's what I couldn't remember the name of it. It's a Turing test. Yeah, so far we have not passed the Turing test, and every once in a while somebody gets all excited because they're like, oh my gosh, my program is going to pass the Turing test, and then they give them they enter this contest. They give them the parameters and they don't pass it. They're like, well, this just doesn't sound. And the judges are always able to pick out the ones that are like, yeah, this is not a human. This is an AI. But I don't know. Maybe in our lifetime, at that point, I'll be glad to shuffle off this mortal coil and get the hell out of here before the world turns into Terminator. So I'll be happy to leave. See you guys. I'll see you guys later.
See, the funny thing about this statement.
Computers can already write better than us. My 5-year-old grandson can write better than us. So that's not too hard.
The funny thing about this whole technology thing and AI art, it doesn't Inverse Alien, we talked about that at the very beginning of this podcast.
Yeah, we already talked about that. It's a little more.
The president.
Apparently, the story is a little deeper than we thought. So, but that was different. That was actually under a category. He wasn't trying to pass it off as real art. That was under a category where you were able to present. Yeah.
Well, okay. He passed it off as digital art, which is digital art. You know what else is digital art? Anything that I do in Photoshop from scratch is digital art. So digital art is a very, 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 very wide span of things. He put it in as, I generated this in Midjourney. It is in the digital art category. He was very upfront about it. But people who are concerned about this destroying artists' lives, we have a lot bigger issues with technology destroying our livelihoods. Self-checkout kills lots of jobs. Look at Ford laying off how many people because machines can do it. All these things where people are getting laid off for real jobs. We need fewer people in order to farm because of the machines, stuff like that. And
this is a march of progress. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so there's a lot bigger issues than can somebody draw something or not, because we have people that literally cannot put food on the table for, in a lot of different aspects. It's been going on for quite a while.
Look up. For those who don't know, look up the term Luddite. Luddites were the people who they followed a guy named General Ludd, who was that was a name he was just given. But basically, they were people who were violently opposed to technology during the Industrial Revolution, and they would get together in gangs and they would destroy technology because they honestly really saw this as taking their jobs away, which it was. I mean, a lot of this technology was going to take their jobs away. And so, and it's really interesting if you read about Luddites that they were, that they were treated pretty badly because the Industrial Revolution was helping people who were already really rich be a lot richer because they were able to, hey, we don't have to pay these peasants anymore. I got this cotton gin over here that's going to pick all this cotton in 2 hours. And so, they weren't just crazy people. They saw those futures like, hey, we need to destroy. Now there was nothing you could really do about it except go destroy machines. But for a while they're a real problem. Go to Wikipedia and just read about Luddites. There's a good little. There's some really good books about it, but there's a good little article about what Luddites stood for. And so, we're the same problem now because we have all kinds of technologies right now that are going out of style. I mean, it's the same. The buggy whip. The guys that made the buggy whip. The minute the first Model T Ford rolled off the assembly line, that was it. I mean, their livelihood had a certain amount of years, and that was going to be it. And we see that every year with new technology. I mean, there's a lot of people that they think that and I saw people absolutely say this, Eric, that because 5E is going to be using VTT, there's not going to be any more face-to-face gaming anymore. It's just not going to happen. I'm like, what? Right? Like, no, it's all going to be online now. I mean, that's because once WotC does it, it's all going to be online. Everybody's going to want to play 5E or 6E or whatever, and they're just not going to game face to face. I'm like, have you been to a convention lately? There's still conventions. I mean, until people decide to stop meeting in person and gaming, no, there's going to be gaming in person.
What I think is more important is us trying to catch up to the technology we're creating. And for me, since I was a kid, I thought that by the time I was an adult, when I was a kid, I had this idyllic idea that by the time I was an adult, we'd be evolved enough as a human race to come together and be living in Federation age of understanding of each other. And instead, I'm living in this world where everyone's trying to shoot their neighbor. And I'm like, okay. So Where's my federation? But we need to catch up to our technology. We're developing on this technology. Great. We need to catch up to our technology and evolution and understand that if we're going to use that, we need to adapt in other ways. Humans are supposed to be able to adapt. Let's adapt. Let's do something.
We need a whole show about philosophy, because there's a whole philosophy built around the fact that once again, I can't remember the name of this theory, but it's how technology, how quickly it increases every year. It got to where, at the beginning of the 20th century, we were flying Kitty Hawk, and then by the end of the 20th century, we got space stations. So, I mean, things happen faster and faster because you have all these centuries where technology just crept along, and then all of a sudden it just got a little faster and a little faster and a little faster. And then we went from computers that were as big as a house to now I've got a computer here that has all the knowledge of the world. It's this big, and someday it's going to be this big. It's going to fit in my head. And so people have a very hard time dealing with that psychologically.
Well, are you aware that the spaceship that landed on the moon, that let us walk on the moon, had less tech in it than my remote control for a TV does these days?
Wow.
It had less technology than my TV remote.
Well, look at they joke about how many man hours it took for TI to develop the first calculator. And I read a really interesting book. How they had the calculator is one little app on my phone. It was like a life for them to make this calculator, and they do. Wow. I mean, it took some of these people years and years of their life. Now, a little tiny app on your phone that you like for create long, and then also.
Your hotel internet is doing its best impression of the old warehouse internet.
I think it decided you should be the new R2D2.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Roboting. Well, I think my hotel decided 2 hours was enough.
I think you're probably right. See, I was going to say that Alex grew up in the Star Trek Next Generation era. We grew up with classic Star Trek with the exposable red shirts. Mm-hmm. So for people to get killed needlessly, for us, was just part of the TV series. The Federation was just like, hey, throw out another red-shirted male to get killed. How many to get killed this time? I don't know. Random explosion. All right, kill off another one. Always a red shirt. So
why is your captain beaming down to the planet that you haven't explored yet? Don't think about that. Just beam Kirk down with a bunch of red shirts. Yeah.
Some of the best.
What was the captain doing on those planets? He didn't need to be. Shouldn't be.
He has to be the away team. He's the star. I think
Picard was too smart for that. Picard knew he wasn't supposed to do that, so he stayed up.
Well, he still wanted to be quasi-macho.
Yeah, every once in a while he popped in there, but he wasn't Kurt.
But yeah, I think Mike's internet is playing games with him at this point.
Yes,
and it's the witching hour because we have officially passed 2 hours and 2 minutes on the live stream. Alice, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you very much. Oh, we love having you on the show.
I hope I was helpful.
Yes, you were
very much so.
You are welcome back whenever you wish. Honestly, and we say that without hesitation because you are a great guest. And listen, not that Mike and I aren't knowledgeable, but we have our own spheres of knowledge. You are the jack of all trades, but in your jack of all trades knowledge, you are pretty much a journeyman at each level, from what I've seen. So you are well rounded. If this was a traveler game, you'd have found some way to jack up the jack of all trades skill. So
I'm trying to do that with a character that I built.
There you go. You see,
one of the character portraits I sent you to post up is actually my character that I made for a traveler game.
Nice. Okay.
Nice. Yes.
You know what? Look at that. I didn't even know, and yet somehow I knew. Inverse Alien. Thank you. And thank you for we try to have good topics. We try to have amazing guests. Sometimes we have amazing guests, like today.
Thank you for the compliment.
exceptional guests. They don't quite reach amazing, but we definitely hit that today. So I want to
thank you guys for the compliment.
You're very welcome. I want to thank everybody for showing up with the live stream. I want to thank Alice immensely. I would thank Mike, but it's Mike. But he's
flex.
But he's showing up from Gamehole. So if you're at Gamehole, find Mike.
Yeah, I'll have lots to talk about next week. Maybe we'll talk about Gamehole next week. All the people I saw, all the stuff I did. So we'll see.
So folks, we just started something new. If you go to Tenkar's Tavern. Oh my God! Now I can't remember what the hell it's called. So tenkarstavern.substack.com. I'll put a link in the note. But tenkarstavern.substack.com. We are doing the Tavern Video Network. So basically, you're going to get weekly updates on the weekend of what's going on in Joe the Lawyer's channel, Matt Jackson's channel, the Tavern's channel. Joe Block is going to be part of the network. We will add other channels as they come up.
I want to have a channel. I told you this. I'm thinking about my channel. I think I have a theme. I think I have a theme for a channel.
The idea is for all of us to get other people to watch each other's stuff. So I think that this exposes everybody's audience to more stuff. So it was an idea, and it's been doing pretty well. So it launched last weekend, and hopefully this weekend we actually hit full gear with our write-ups. So again,
maybe when BWK comes back, we can join your network.
There you go. See,
I'm really hoping to get BWK back up and running. I really do. Awesome. I still get messages from people. When's BWK coming back? My kid learned this game because of you, or I learned this game because of you. I'm like, thanks.
See, that's it. See, and that's the whole point. Get people to, the whole idea that everybody puts that link I just threw out there as a pinned comment on their video, and when you go to that page, they go, "Oh, look at all this stuff that's available." And it isn't a zero sum, folks. Some people think this hobby is zero sum. Too many creators, too much stuff being published. No, it's not zero sum. Oh, there's just too much. We don't need any more videos or podcasts. Sure, you do. You got to find the ones that you like. But you're not taking away listenership from somebody else because you find something that's cool. I think it helps everybody. So, as always, and I know Mr. Gunn already did this when he left us like 30 minutes ago. I'm not your father. I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm not going to wash your face for your other places. Use your common sense. It's an endemic. It's not going away. Take the precautions that are necessary for your risk factors and where you live. Be safe, be well, God bless, roll the dice, roll them well. Huge thank you to Alice. And by the way, yes, my second time listening to Alice, because I heard her earlier this afternoon with her and Rach doing their twice a week gathering.
Yeah. Make Rach have Rach flex before we go.
Rach flex.
All
right, come on.
Come on, Rach, you can flex. You got this.
Wearing a sweatshirt.
Yeah.
You gotta get in, Rach.
Lord, look at those guns! My God,
she's got some guns now. She's got some serious guns now.
Both are ripped. God.
Yeah, it's coming.
I'm not ripped, but
okay, Arnold. All right, folks.
Go, Rach.
Thank you so much. Catch you later.
Later.
Bye, everyone. Bye.